Okay, so here's a video that I'm making to talk about design number 3 with the optical illusion project. And this design is really about working with positive and negative space. So as you know, or as I've been talking about, we have space. So we have the object itself. So if my subject matter is a little cupcake, the cupcake is the positive space, and the background, the empty space, is the negative. When we think about it, everything takes up space, but then we have the emptiness around us. So what do we call it? We call it the negative space. So anything that takes up space is the positive, or the background is the negative. Sometimes in art, people like to manipulate that so that the positive space then becomes the negative space, or vice versa. So in this design, this is a finished one, an example that I had in the Google presentation. So here you can see the cupcake design, and it has a color scheme, but if you look in each section, it flip-flops. So how do we go about creating this optical illusion? First thing you're going to need is a motif. A motif is a design that gets repeated over and over again to create a pattern. So you have to come up with what your design is. For me, I created a cupcake. So I'll just kind of stick with that. That way I don't steal anybody's genius idea. If you decide to work with desserts or cupcakes, things like that, it's okay. But I'm just gonna stick with my design. And so here I am sketching out probably about a 1" by 1" design. Could be thinner or smaller or bigger than that. But something that you can get multiple times transferred onto your 4x4 square. If you're working smaller than 4x4, hopefully it's not too much smaller than that. It should be that or larger. Okay, so here's my design. If I want, I can leave little details like that. That would be fine. So this is my motif. So this may not be an option for everyone if you are all remote. If you are in the classroom, I have tracing paper available, little pieces like this. You're going to start by tracing your motif onto your tracing paper. So I can see it, and I'm going over it with pencil. There's some great qualities with your graphite, meaning they work really well for transferring a design, just kind of like when you're drawing and you notice your hand is just full of the graphite. That can be really annoying, but it's also a great way to transfer an image. So here I have the cupcake traced onto my tracing paper. If that's not an option, you can cut out your motif. Now I'm just looking for some scissors. Here we go. So I'm going to cut this out because I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can transfer it. I'm going to try and get close, but it doesn't have to be exact. When cutting, it is helpful to use the inside of the scissors. That's usually where they are the sharpest and you have the most control. Okay, so I've cut out my little design, my motif. It's a fun little word. I didn't make it up. It's an art term. Okay, getting some extra paper here. So, like I said, we're working with the 4x4 box. I'm just going to trace this out. Pretend that this is my sketchbook paper that you guys are working on. 4x4 space. And I'm wanting to rotate my design. So as you can see, I put one here in the middle. That way I can have the entire symbol, my design. You know, I can see all of it. And then the other sections are probably going to be cropped. So in the center, since I have my tracing paper, one side has the graphite, one side does not. If it doesn't matter about your motif being backwards, I could trace it directly on there. If I don't want it to be backwards, I am going to have to trace it one more time. So this is backwards. I'm going to trace it and put graphite on the back. And you'll notice if you have graphite on one side and you apply pressure with your pencil, it's going to transfer. And this is, like I said, I have to do this to make sure it's not backwards. So if I lift it up, you should see it there because it has graphite on both sides. So now I can flip-flop it, and I'm not going to put it directly in the center and then not tilt it. I think it would be fun to tilt it to make it look like it's moving around. So if it's like this, it kind of makes it look like it's sitting still a little bit, but to give it a little more of a diagonal, you should see it just makes it look a little more, gives it a little more movement. Kind of like when we talked about lines and how a diagonal line will create the impression that something is moving or not steady. I think that just adds a little fun quality to it. So I'm tracing it out with my pencil. I'm applying a little pressure. Mechanical pencils do not work as well, so make sure you're using like at least a number 2 pencil. Pick it up. I should see it kind of faintly. So if I want, I can go back over it to make it a little more permanent. That way it's there. Now let's say you don't have any tracing paper. Maybe you're working remotely and you don't have that option. So here was one that I made of my motif, my cupcake. I'm going to shade the back of the piece of paper. I know it sounds a little weird, but I'm going to cover it with graphite on the back. Applying all that pressure may transfer it onto the other side, like if you needed to flip it around. So as you can see, it kind of made an impression there. So if I wanted to create one that was backwards, I could transfer this onto the paper and then cut this one out, and I can have it in the reverse, but you don't have to have it reversed. So anyway, I have my design and it has graphite on the back. Now I can use that to trace, since it has graphite on the other side. Some great qualities of graphite. It's messy, but yep, works great for transferring. And they sell sheets of graphite for transfer too. Or you can just shade the back with a dark pencil, especially like a number 2 pencil. Doesn't work as well with mechanical. The lead's just not dark enough. Okay, so I traced out my design. When I lift it up, it should be transferred onto my 4x4 square. As you can see, I cropped it. One of the designs that you want to create is what's called like a popcorn rotation. It's not actually popcorn involved, but if you think about how popcorn, when it pops, it flips over, it turns. So it's kind of similar to that in the fact that it's rotating and flip-flopping as it moves around the composition, as it moves around, you know, where you're drawing, how you have it laid out. So you can turn it around, you can flip-flop it. And this creates the illusion that the design is going off of the page, that it kind of continues on forever instead of trying to fit it nicely into the box. So from there, I'm going to transfer my design in a popcorn rotation, trying to leave just a little bit of negative space, so the emptiness. So I'm tracing my cupcake. Like I said, if you have tracing paper, which I'm providing in class, I think that's a little bit easier to work with because you can see exactly where you're lining it up. I'm just trying to create like an even balance. So right here, you know, I have something here, here, here. This kind of looks empty. So trust your gut. You know, if your brain is telling you that something feels off, chances are it probably is. So this feels a little empty, so I'm going to add a little bit more of a cupcake here. Now I have the option that I can go and outline. You can do that if you want. But if you leave it, there's some other options later on. So if you don't make it permanent, you know, you can or you can't. It just kind of depends on what you want for your design. Sometimes people want to outline everything so they know what their design is, because when they go to add colors, you know, with markers or colored pencil, when they add the color component, They may not want to have the black Sharpie, meaning this design right here is outlined in Sharpie. What if you wanted to reverse the lines? Instead of black lines being outlined, maybe it's another color, maybe it's white, the opposite. And you can't do that if you've outlined it. But for me, as you can see, I outlined everything with my ultra fine black Sharpie. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll pick up with part 2.